This is the Unscripted Podcast.
You had one job, Mike. You just hit the button.
They never trusted me with the button, Chris.
So, Bob, you're looking a little peaky today, Bob. Are you all right down there?
I don't know. I shaved this morning. Is that?
No, in case you can't tell. Yeah, right. I know it. You know, Bob is on an extra slim fast diet. It's like meth, right? Listen, we're glad you guys are with us today. We've got two of our members here at Kensington Woods here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And these two are two of our brothers, but they also have these two share something uniquely together that I don't share with them. And it's not that they're these hunka burning loves or anything like that, but it's that these two guys are members of the United States military. And so last week, if you joined us, we talked about the Christian in self-defense and how the Bible kind of describes and how it goes through and kind of paints this picture of the way that a person should be with regards to the self-defense of their family, self-defense of their neighbors, their friends, you know, this and that. When is self-defense? When can you play that card, as it were? So if you didn't get the chance to listen to that, we'd like for you to go back and listen to last week's episode. And if you have any questions about it, certainly just shoot us an email. If you hated it, it was Bob's fault, and
Because he's not here.
Because he's not here. But if you don't think we covered something well, or we didn't cover something in a way that you think we should have, we'd like to hear what you have to say about it. So, with that being said, this week on our podcast, we're going to talk about. We want to hear these guys' perspective as regards to Aaron became a Christian and then signed up to be a member of the service, right? What branch of the service are you in?
I'm with the Army. Right now I'm with the Mississippi Army National Guard.
Okay. And Mike joined the Army at what age?
I joined at the age of 20.
20. And then what? How many years later? 13 years later?
It's been 13 years.
So 12 years later or so, Mike becomes a Christian, right? So Mike joins the Army, then becomes a Christian. Aaron becomes a Christian, then joins the Army. And so we kind of want to get these guys' perspective on it. So, Aaron, since you're on the end down there, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so there's a lot to unfold. I'll start around the time I became a Christian.
Okay, so how did you come to obey the gospel? Who taught you the gospel?
I was taught the gospel by a brother in Christ up in Illinois named Andrew. He's a youth minister. Mm-hmm. And he was, at the time, I was not a Christian. Mm-hmm. Met my wife at the time, and I started just going to church with her. I became friends with this youth minister, Andrew, and he asked me if I wanted to study with him some more, and I did, and very quickly came to, after he told me the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, came to the idea like I wanted to get baptized that week.
Right.
So I was baptized in August of 2018.
All right, August of 2018. And when did you sign up for the service then?
I signed up for the service in the fall of 2019.
So a year and some change later.
Yes. Right.
So
at the time when I was baptized, I was actually just starting pharmacy school in Illinois, and I wasn't too certain that that's where I wanted to go. That's
you mean
what
as far as being a pharmacist?
Yes, as far as being a pharmacist, I wasn't 100% set on that.
So what's your end goal now?
My end goal now is I'm going to be a nurse. I'm in nursing school currently while I'm in the military, and once I'm done with my school, I'm going to commission into the Army as a nurse.
So you're staying?
For the time being, yeah.
Right. So, okay. All right. Mike, give us your spiel. Where are you from, Aaron, by the way?
I'm from a very tiny town in Illinois called Fillmore.
Okay.
Nobody's ever heard of it, I promise. But
right.
if you've seen a cornfield, you've been there.
It's okay. All right. So, Mike, tell us about you.
So I'm actually from all over Texas. I've got family in South Texas, and then I enlisted in the Army out of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay.
And so that was back in 2008. And I mean, I enlisted because I watched the Twin Towers fall on TV. I was a little bit younger. I it was like in 8th grade when I watched that happen. So I wasn't able to just rush out, hit the recruiting station and do the whole 9 yards. But I mean, the surge was still going very strong, and was beginning to taper off a little bit when I joined. So I've been in a variety of different units. I started off in light air assault units in like Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and then I PCS from there and went to PCS means move, y'all.
Yeah, you can't use the acronyms.
So I moved from there to Vicenza in Italy, and after that first deployment, I had gotten married to the most beautiful woman in the world. I know you're out there, baby. So
good job.
So I got to Italy and I deployed again in Italy. We were hitting the operational tempo pretty hard. Some very interesting things happened on that deployment that caused us to kind of shift and change gears, and then I left.
Shift and change gears.
Yes, the Army, us. So I left there, and then in order to seek a more stable home life, because I was actually a geographical bachelor, my wife and kids did not come with me to Italy. So
that means geographical bachelor is an Army term. That means that you're separated from your family. You're right.
That's right.
The clan's cut. Right?
She was still living in and working in Kentucky, and I was living in Italy and doing my job. And then I moved from there to Texas, and that was what I could do to take care of my family while still being able to do my job. So we've bounced around since then. We moved from Texas to Hawaii, and I got a chance to work in sunny Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and then we more recently moved here in 2018. And I got to say, Central Mississippi has been a blessing.
Well. Where were you deployed to? Weren't you in Afghanistan?
I've been to Afghanistan 3 times. I've never been to Iraq, strangely enough. I just wasn't in a unit that had that deployment designated to them. So I went to Afghanistan in 2010 and in 2012 and in 2014.
So you've seen a lot of action there.
Yep.
So Central Mississippi, you say it's been in what way? What's it been a blessing?
It's been a blessing because a lot of Mississippians share similar values to
what do you mean by that?
My family. Well, Judeo-Christian societies that
the culture
absolutely
here.
The culture here falls in line with family, God, church, and these are things that we did not experience enough of as we were kind of moving around. We saw some of it in Texas. But it is a very densely populated area with a lot of different people flying a lot of different flags. They are definitely Texas is a melting pot. A lot of people coming to Texas.
Right.
And then
I saw the other day that I can't remember. I think it's Texas and Florida. I can't remember the number that they were growing a day, and it was just like
it's a new resident every 6 seconds.
Yeah, just think about that, dude.
That's wild.
I mean, just think about that, and and they're flooding from places like California and stuff like that. I mean, I can't remember how many people are bleeding.
I wonder what they're leaving. What are they leaving?
I don't
from?
know. I heard. I saw the other day that somebody said, worst word somebody says is, "Hey, I just moved here from California."
I don't know. I was going to ask you the question because I'm not about to get set up like that.
Hey, everything's on the table here.
So that's how my family came to be in Mississippi. So the jobs I've held, I'm an infantry soldier. I have been in light infantry units. I've been in airborne infantry units. Those are the guys that jump out of airplanes. I was sent to sniper school in 2014. I graduated, and then I became a sniper section leader when I was in Texas. And then we moved to Hawaii, and then I ran a sniper section for 3 years in Hawaii.
So you shot Hawaiians?
No, that's no.
Oh, I just didn't.
No. So and then moving here, here in Mississippi, we work with the National Guard units. And I'm a coach. I work with National Guard units and try to coach them and work with them on their training.
So now, and you became a Christian here.
Yes.
And so Aaron, he said that it was a youth minister because you were going to church with your girlfriend, right, at the time.
At the time, yeah.
Right. And so, ladies, if you find one that you think that may be the one, there's a real good litmus test. Now, don't hang over their head. Unless you get in the water, you're not getting the ring. Don't do that. But there's a real good litmus test whether you can see. Because I have a great story about a lady. Awesome story. I studied with her boyfriend before they were actually dating. He becomes a Christian. I mean, he is on the way to become a Christian the night before. we were discussing, like, he was just freaking out because he's kind of made this connection that mom and daddy, there's a lot of people in peril, right? And he's on the way to become a Christian, and his mama dies. And he'd been dating this other girl then, because he started coming to church with me. He meets her, and I mean, like, it's just like, we just figured they're going to get married. Well, dude, I mean, it just imploded after that. And so he saw, really her, not me at this point, even though I was the messenger, but because he had the most emotional tie to her at that point then, right? I mean, it went south bad. But there's a silver lining. It wasn't long, a year or so later, and she comes to me and she's like, listen, I cannot get emotionally invested this time without knowing whether this guy that's sweet on me is all in or not. So I studied with him, baptized him. They got married. He adopted her son. There's a few good men that'll do that. And he adopted her son, and now they've got a little girl together. It worked out, right? But she held on to the fact that I'm not going to have my home in turmoil just because my heart got ahead of my Christianity, my spiritual life. And so they're better off for it today. And so and Mike, you became a Christian here. So Joe, to give us the little spiel.
So there's three people that I would credit with bringing me to Christianity. The first one is my wife.
All right.
And that is because she supported me for a very long time, even through some of my she's seen me at my very worst. Wives have that great privilege of seeing you when you need the most work, and they're very good at also pointing that out. I'm gonna give you some notes. But
privileged.
Yeah. So I had her support, and she knew that I needed to find my way to Christ. And then I had met Joe while I was actually working in Hawaii, and he's another brother in the church here. I met Joe while I was working in Hawaii, and it just so happened that his daddy had fallen ill. And so when I moved here, he had gotten assigned here at Camp Shelby in an effort to also be there for his family. And it wasn't long before an opportunity arose, right? An opportunity like, hey, a friend of mine really needs a set of uniforms that, like, is the size of a middle schooler. And he's like, do you know how many middle school size soldiers do you know? And Joe was like, well, I know one, so let me see what he can do. And that's how you and I met.
Right.
So it wasn't long before, you, me, my wife, and Joe and Jessica are all sitting down and studying. And then we get to talking about Philip and the eunuch. And let me tell you something. I felt like I was in a very hot seat when we read that. In fact, we read through that, and it was my understanding that if lightning struck me right then and there, I knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
With certainty. And so by God's grace, you had a body of water behind your home.
That's the same thing the eunuch said, right?
And
here's water.
I said, we got to go.
Yeah.
You were like, "Are you sure you don't want to think about this? Like, I don't want you to feel like anybody's pulling your, twisting your arm or pulling your leg, and I'm not trying to drag you anything. I want you to make sure you completely understand." And I was like, "No, I understand completely. It is Windex. We got to go."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we call our pond behind our house. What do we call it? Ranger Pond.
Ranger Pond.
Because we put 3 Rangers in it, right?
That's
and
right.
So now we have Mike, who becomes a Christian after war, right? Yeah. And you got a family, you got your sweet wife, your 3 pretty little girls. Aaron's got a wife, Rebecca. She's going to school to be what?
School psychologist. She's in her 3rd year of PhD.
Yeah, that's right. She's a doctor. She's going to be a doctor, yes. Right? And Mike's wife, she's a dental hygienist.
Yep,
and
she's a registered dental hygienist here in the great state of Mississippi, and here fairly soon. She's going to be in the DO program, hopefully with William Carey, which is the doctor of osteopathic medicine.
That's right.
Yeah.
And she's a service member too.
She is. She works up at Key Field. She's in the Mississippi Air National Guard, and she actually works with the religious services.
Yeah. So what an awesome thing. So let's just from a biblical perspective, I just want to see something here. In Genesis, I think it's 13 or 14. I want you to see a story here. And so there's something kind of unique that goes on in this, I don't know. There's a lot of Easter eggs, I reckon. Maybe I should say it that way with some of the things that are happening. So there's a point where Abraham and Lot, his nephew, are going to be, they've grown so large that they need to kind of separate themselves, right? There's just becoming, they've gotten so big that now they've moved into kind of conglomerate stage, right? So all of Lot's herdsmen, all his cattle, everything like that, I mean, they're just employees, right? And all of Abraham's herdsmen, they're just employees. So if I want my cattle scenario to work out easy, and I don't care about yours, right? Like, I want mine to go good, and you know what you want? You want yours to go good. So there ends up this strife, but there's an Easter egg here, and the Easter egg is this. Now, this event happens after what I'm going to talk about here, but this happens, God blesses Abraham so much because of his faithfulness that he is immensely wealthy, to the point that he's got all these stuff, but it happens after this event. It happens after this event in Genesis 14. So what I want to do is use this to show that God was still pleased with Abraham after this event. So in Genesis 14, in verse 1, and it said, it came to pass in the day, say that name right there.
Amraphel.
Okay. Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar. Say that word right there.
Chedorlaomer. I spent some time in Afghanistan. You knew that, right?
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
That's why he's having you read it, not me.
That's right. King of Elam, entitled King of Nations. They made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboiim. Is that two? Yeah. And the king of Bela, that is Zor. All these joined together in a valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. So here's these old boys. So you got to understand that kind of historically, a king was, we think about a king like this dude is over nations, right? Biblical times, a king was just really just a local warlord. Really he's just like the guy over Sodom, the guy over Gomorrah, the guy over Jeroboam, the king of these are like local feudal. Like, there's only one country in the world today that doesn't have a government. You know what that is? Somalia. It's controlled by and large this way by warlords. So basically, I'm going to do what I want to do. I make my own rules. I make my own laws, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So if I want more money, more power, more women, more dope, more whatever I want, I just got to raise a bigger army some kind of way. How do I do that? I don't know. Whatever, right? So, but these old boys right here are going to fight. So all these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that's the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked these people.
You got closer on that pronunciation.
I did. And the Horites and their mountain. And so they go through this scenario, right? Then I want you to see what happens. Now, and the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits. The king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and remainder fled to the mountains. They took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, provisions, and went their way. They also took Lot, Abraham's brother, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So after Abraham's, Abraham and Lot's strife between their herdsmen, Abraham goes to Lot, and he's like, Lot, listen, we're brothers. This is going to cause a problem. Like this will eventually cause a problem. And really at this point you can see that like their kind of wealth and family lives have taken on a life of their own. So it's not like they eating together every night. You don't get to see this picture like, all right, Lot, come on, we kill one of your cows tonight. Tomorrow we'll kill one of my sheep, Yeah. Absolutely. So Lot goes, Abraham says, look, you just pick which one you want. And he looks, and the Bible says that Lot pitches his tent towards Sodom. So Lot chooses the well-watered plains of Sodom. From a purely financial standpoint, that was a good decision, right? But, we know what Sodom and Gomorrah are synonymous with, right? Sodom and Gomorrah are synonymous with, that's where we get our modern older laws of sodomy laws come from the city of Sodom. Well, So what we have here is Abraham, Lot has been taken in this kind of fight battle, right? So what I want to see is that you can fight and you can make war and you can make a mess, right? These old boys right here are just fighting more and making a mess. But there's something unique that Abraham does. So we can use the same word, army, and we can mean two different things with it, right? I can mean army, like army really, to me, in my mind, is the guys that are logistics. You get what I'm saying? Like, they're the guys that are going to be, like the Marines. What is the difference between the Marine Corps and the Army?
Well, the Army has the largest Marine landing ever, which actually we just celebrated yesterday.
Right?
Yeah, and the Marines don't.
So
no,
without getting into turf war.
Without getting into a turf war, I mean, truth be told, like the Marine Corps has a very specific purpose. They also have
the Navy, right? I mean,
right. I
worked for the Navy for 20 years, and our job was to make sure that they could get sailors and ships and supplies, and they could do all these technical, things, espionage, all this stuff they had to do, right? So each branch had its own purpose, right? It has a specific purpose that it was doing. So in this day, the purpose was by and large to just bowl, baby. I just want to bowl and get bigger, right? So that's the purpose of these guys. Like, we're going to fight my kingdom, really just my city, my little compound that I've got. I want to make sure that even if I have somebody that's kind of over me, I've served them in this kind of, paradigm of I pay homage, I pay my tithe, as it were, to you. So, but that is a greedy, self-motivated type thing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, Aaron, you go in and both of y'all did the GI Bill, right? So, like, you've been dipping into the GI Bill, right?
Because I'm active duty, I'm still using my tuition assistance to pay for schooling.
Okay. Yeah. So, but both of y'all are using the Army to help pay for your education.
Yeah, that's
right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you went in that's one reason you went in, right? So you're using that part of it, right? You cited that you saw the mess, right?
Yes,
that was created in the wake of 9/11, right? We've almost forgotten that one.
Right there before the close of the Afghan War. The Afghan War was so old, it could have legally purchased an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, just think about that.
It's very difficult for people, especially in today's day and age, and with how quickly we change topics to.
Yeah, when there's a new crisis, always.
Yeah, to stay focused on the longevity and the severity of why we started.
Yeah, and so here's what happens: is Abraham, verse 12, because Lot has chosen this kind of area that he ends up in a mess, right? So that's a sermon for another day, right?
Okay.
Lot picking his bad, Lot picking the spot that he shouldn't have picked.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They also took Lot, verse 12, Abraham's brother's son, so it's his nephew, who dwelt in Sodom, his goods, and departed. Then one who had escaped came and told Abraham, the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth tree of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner. They were allies with Abram. When Abram heard this, that his brother had taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his house, and went as pursued as far as Dan. He divided forces against them by night. He and his servants attacked them, pursued them as far as Hobah, which is in the north Damascus. He brought back all the goods. He brought back his brother Lot, his goods, as well as the women and the people. So, what do you see happening here in this scenario?
What I'm seeing is essentially conquest.
Yeah, but how did he do it? Like, he took 300. What's interesting is sometimes the Bible will say things like about 3,000 souls were saved in Acts 2:41.
Right.
So we don't know if that's 2,918 or if it's 3,142. Right.
Yeah.
But Abraham took 318. It gets specific. So, when you get into details, you're getting minutia, right? Abraham took 318 trained. What do you think he trained them to do? Fight.
Yeah.
Right? So these are trained soldiers of the day. They ain't going to use modern military sniper tactics, right? But what they did do was, look what they did. You can see they're trained. He divided his forces against him by night.
Yeah.
So what does that mean he's trying to do? He's employing military tactics, right? What is his motive behind this, though? It's
A rescue mission, really.
It's a rescue mission, right? So let's take a break, and then we're going to come back from our break, and then I want to talk about your perspective as a Christian. Like what does that mean for me? Because you can become a service member for all the wrong reasons, and you can have all the wrong motives behind doing anything. But let's talk about the Christian perspective on being a serviceman when we come back. All right?
Life in general is about decisions. Every decision that you make has consequences, and you're tethered to every single one of them. Jesus gives us this awesome opportunity that you don't have to make all the decisions in your life all on your own. You see, he invites you to come to him, to learn from him. Jesus gives us this perfect example, and he tells us in Matthew chapter 11, he says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm meek and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light." We have so much to learn from Christ, and he gives us this example of saying, if you really want to learn from me, take my yoke. You see, yokes were used back in Bible times to put two animals together to pull a load or to pull a cart or to plow ground. And you would put an ox together, or you would put two mules together, and they would pull the load together. And that's what Christ offers for us, is he's offering to pull the load for us. Christ invites us to come to him, and we're to be his followers, disciples, learners, people who have yoked in with him. And he builds a community around us called the church. The church is to be made up of people who God have looked at their hearts. You see, the world wants to paint a picture of everything that would divide us. The church has painted a picture of the things that unite us. That Christ, he builds this community that when we've yoked in with other people, they may be different from us, but we can learn from each other. What a beautiful thing that it is when we can have difficult conversations. There's no conversation that the church can't have. And that's what Christ wants from us, is he wants community that's strong, that's yoked in together, that learns from each other, and most importantly, that learns from Jesus. And he invites us to come, take, learn, and find.
So before our break, we were talking about how Abraham raises this army, and it's really, maybe that's a bad word. He deploys, I reckon is the better word, these guys that were specifically trained to do this task, right? So would it be a safe assumption to say that you could be trained in the same tactics as a killer or somebody that go? I mean, we all heard the stories in Vietnam with the necklaces of ears and all the crazy stuff, right?
Right, yeah.
And those guys are always, you're always going to have crazy people, right? And that's why, there's this thing that happened in Texas or any other shooting. These aren't like these are normal people doing this, right?
Right.
So your motives in going in as a serviceman, right? What would you tell people from a Christian perspective that they need to understand about going into the military today? About what is some things that they need to understand? I mean, the military's changing, right?
Yep, absolutely.
In what ways? What do you see the service changing?
I mean, one way that I see it as I'll say newer service member by comparison is there's a lot less of the general force going on deployments, doing all these missions like we were doing 10, 15 years ago.
Well, that's just because of conflict.
Well, right. There's a decrease in conflict, but also I also see like a decrease in the size of the force itself.
What do you mean by that? Explain that.
In certain political climates, I'll keep it this simple. In certain political climates, the people in charge tend to have a lessened budget and they want less personnel overall throughout the military.
So politics.
Yes, politics plays.
I don't want to
huge
get
role in
into
that.
politics, blue, red stuff, but
Right.
but politics, whichever side of the coin you're on with it, politics are a significant part. So what is politics motivated by, guys? Greed, right?
Right.
I mean, like politics will get you. Politicians' job is basically to get you twisted up about something, so that they can vote. I mean, Congress constantly has had like a 30% approval rate. Jesus could use politicians, tax collectors, because there's never been a time in history where people were like, those politicians are pretty good guys. So Jesus can use these guys as like the bottom of the heap type guys.
Or even, hey, everything's going great. You should give us some money.
Yeah, that's right.
Since everything's going so swell.
I mean-
I think I'm going to give myself a raise.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So he can use these immutable things that are going to be understood by everybody everywhere about politicians, right? So there's a lot of politics that govern this, right? So there's a reduction in force, is that you're saying, right? And that's because budgetary. I've been a part of making the budget, right?
Right.
And in the 50s, the late 40s, like World War II era, like 50-some% of the United States budget, the federal government's budget, was for defense.
Yeah.
Now it's like 50% are entitlement programs. So we've completely flipped the script on this. So now let's talk about it from a little bit different perspective. Do you think there's guys, have you ever met guys? I mean, you've been in there long enough to see a lot of folks, right?
Yeah, I've met some characters.
Yeah. Mike, you're just like a word craftsman, Like you, I've read these papers that you wrote and everything like that, and you wax so poetically with them.
Oh, thank you.
And so, even that's funny. The why? What? Tell me what you mean by you've met some characters. Qualify that statement.
So it's interesting because service members are looked at in a monolithic fashion. I had this conversation with somebody just the other day in that much like the world view for police officers it's kind of taken a negative connotation in light of recent events. The world view for service members is generally positive. I mean, you consider the fact that
the worldview in the sense of like the way that
America views its service members is generally positive. I mean, they're even referred to as service members, i.e., service.
Right.
So,
and that's a word picture.
Exactly. And so, oftentimes, what people overlook is the fact that Marines and seamen are all people, and people by their nature are imperfect and they're completely fallible. So that's one of the things that I've met some people in the military who were phenomenal soldiers, and I've met some people in the military that they left some things to be desired, and eventually they left service for better or worse.
So, have you ever seen? So let's ask this from a perspective of somebody that's a family man, sure. Right? You're getting there, right? You and Rebecca been married how long?
Almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years. You know that under the law, actually, under the Mosaic Law, I understand we serve under the new law now, but under the Mosaic Law, you weren't allowed to go to war for a year when you were newlywed.
Really?
Yeah, that was. I remember my boss, and we were just like pounding work, man. I mean, like we were up to our eyeballs. And I found this. I was reading my Bible, and I found this, and he was a real religious guy, and so I was like, "Hey, just want you to see that I'm supposed to get a year off." He's like, "That's old law, son."
Oh wow, he knew. He was ready to go.
Yeah,
like the second you try to shoehorn that in, he's like, "No."
Yeah, so
I also have read that.
Yeah, yeah. So can the military can service in the military be a serious detriment to families?
It can. It puts it is not designed to be. And this has changed in more recent years. So let me just go ahead and caveat that, but. It is not designed for people to go about their agenda first. The priority is the mission, and so the Army.
When you say their agenda, you mean like
the family agenda,
right?
The family agenda, right? Because I mean, there's always things going on with mom and the kids, for
right?
instance, or somebody's in and out of the hospital, or we've got schooling, and there's things that happen in an everyday function in the family. And to some degree, a lot of that ends up being put on, the wife, and that gets talked about quite a bit in the military.
The non-service member, however that is.
Or the husband, yes, if we have a female service member. So whoever is not currently serving, which is even more difficult when you're in my position where there's dual military and you have both family members or service members. We're basically playing tag,
right.
Figuring out how we're going to get everything done. No, it's not easy, And then you look at deployments and then times where your children will be away from you. I mean, I've been gone for up to a year. I've been gone as little as 6 months, and in that time, things change. You even have to come back together and learn how to live with one another. So
it's gonna be a real challenge then if you don't have a strong marriage.
Absolutely.
So in other words, what you're saying then is that, for example, Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her.
Yes.
That's a different scenario for every family dynamic, right? I mean, so like the way that Jessica and I put that into practice, right? The way that I practice that towards Jessica, or you towards Rebecca, or you towards Sam is different, right? But the command is still there, right? So you still have to muddle it out with Sam, right? Like, how then do I die for Sam, right? Or how do I die for Rebecca? What is it going to look like for our family dynamic? But I bet you've seen a lot of families that have suffered because of service.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that, especially like in Hawaii, for instance. When we were in Hawaii, there was a large threat of coming into conflict with North Korea.
Just because y'all were forward patrol, you mean?
Well, I mean, we're right there on the edge of the Pacific. If the first people to go out the door for that. And so because of that, the only way to stay ready is to stay constantly training. And oftentimes you would have commanders who they would see an open space on the calendar and they're like, well, we got to put something in there. We got to train the boys, and the girls. We got to train. We got to get out there and do something. Because if we're not doing anything, then essentially we're planning to fail. And so oftentimes that would come at the detriment of the sacrifice of the family unit. And I myself found myself gone more often than not. And then when I got home, I'm so busy trying to sleep or recuperate. I mean, my wife would often say, like, I would spend a third of my free time just packing for the next thing. It was very common.
Yeah, and so there's some serious challenges to a family life, right? And like, that's really true in any field that requires a lot of time. Doctors, servicemen, there's a few vocational trades that get listed year in and year out. Machinist is one of them, by the way, that requires so much time. But and one of the reasons why there's so few left.
Right.
So much stuff that needs to be fixed piece by piece that requires so much time. And you realize that you can trade your time for huge sums of money. And so that's a very addictive thing, right? So let's shift gears a little bit. What about from the perspective of if you were to, let's just say that things go sideways with the Ukraine, right?
Okay.
And you're deployed and you guys go to, let's just say that you end up in Kiev, right? I think the Ukrainians call it Kyiv, right? The Russians call it Kiev. The Ukrainians call it Kyiv. But
it's an American tradition to pronounce everything incorrectly on purpose.
Right. That's right. Hey, there's if you speak 2 languages, you know what you are?
Bilingual.
If you speak 3, you know what you are? I bet you can figure it out if you just think English a minute.
Trilingual.
There you go. If you speak 4 languages, guess what you are?
Quadlingual.
If you speak 1, guess what you are? An American.
Yeah. I mean, I wondered if that's where we were going with this. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that let's just say things go sideways. You end up back in a sniper's nest, right? And you end up in some capacity of a medic unit. How would you, Mike, now look at that versus 5 years ago? When was your last deployment to Afghanistan?
2014, yeah.
So that's what, 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a piece.
Yeah, so 8 years ago, your deployment in Afghanistan, and looking back, would you do the same things you did when you were in Afghanistan with regards to, I know that your social life, your things that you did to keep yourself occupied, those habits naturally have to change as a Christian.
Yes.
But as regards to military order, Mike, here's a picture of this dude. I need you to draw a bead on him and peel his noggin off his shoulders. Would you have a problem with that?
No.
Why is that?
When you are engaged in warfare, every single combatant has the capacity to do either you or somebody else harm. And so essentially by me doing nothing, or maybe I draw a bead on this guy, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I do everything, and I feign as if I am doing what I am supposed to do, but I choose not to shoot him, okay? And then that man goes on later to, drop a briefcase and blow up a city center. Or maybe he just pulls a cord as a vehicle's rolling by and kills an entire squad inside of an armored vehicle. These things have happened all the time. And the reality is by me acting to do nothing, I can fail to protect my brothers and my sisters.
There is a really unique thing that happens with Moses and Aaron. And I want to look at something in Luke 14, but while we're turning there, so Moses and Aaron, the second time God is going to bring water from the rock. The first time God says, strike the rock, let the water come out. So Moses bonked the rock, here we come, we roll out, right? The second time they come to Moses, they're complaining and fussing and whining, and Moses goes over and he strikes the rock again. God told Moses in this scenario, Moses, speak to the rock, right? Speak to the rock, Moses. Well, Moses in his kind of little pitching a fit. By the way, Moses wrote the story of him being a knucklehead. That's another way that you can prove inspiration. Like, nobody tells the story of writing their own story and like, this is the reason God killed me, because I was so stupid right here. And this one little event, right? So this one event, God says, because Moses gets up and he says, how long are we going to have to put up with you rebellious people? He essentially just kind of like makes himself the center point, right? Like, it's really God. And so God says, that's it. Moses, you're not going into the promised land. As a matter of fact, get Aaron, your brother, get Aaron, carry him up on the mountain. They execute Aaron publicly. They take his like priest robe off of him and they go up there and they execute him publicly. And Aaron didn't say anything. So Aaron is charged, as it were, with the sin of omission. The sin of omission. So you think about this. If somebody, we talked about self-defense last week. If somebody breaks in my house and we hear the series of break-ins that have happened and 3 people have been killed in this area, right? Somebody breaks in my house and this guy fits my description and I choose to terminate life with this guy. I can look at that as me being this cool hothead, right? Like, I know dudes that would love nothing more than to get in a gunfight. You know what I'm saying? Like, they train all the time and they carry their like 3 magazines and their gun and this and that and the other, and all the time, and they're just waiting for a gunfight because they just want to fight. Now, this guy comes in my house and I decide I'm going to terminate life, right? He comes in my house, there's a threat, boom, he's dead. The way I see it, I'm taking care of my neighborhood too. I'm not just taking care of my family. And so in Luke 14, there's this really kind of unique scenario. Jesus talks about, and there's an Easter egg here. So we get to see things. So in the parable of Matthew 25 of how Jesus, the parable of the talents, they were supposed to double, kind of produce from what God gave them, right? You've got this money, we expect a return on it, right? The single talent man, he goes and hides it in the ground. And when the master comes back and says, you wicked and lazy servant, I gave you this talent and you just wasted it. He says, here's an Easter egg. He says, could you not have just given it to the bank and let it draw interest? I mean, at least you'd have gained interest on it. Just make a good financial decision with it. So we get to see kind of with this, the Lord uses the idea of like, there's a lot of ways that you can make money. One of them is investing, right? So the Lord uses these things that we understand are good and wise practice. And look what he does here. In Luke 14, and he's talking about leaving all to follow him. Or what king, in verse 31, or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first to consider whether he is able to come up with 10,000 to meet the one against him with 20,000. Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So what you get to see is Jesus, that there is a way. Now, he doesn't get into like logistics here of what these guys, but Jesus is using this kind of thing, and you get to see authorization from it. Here's another one. Turn just a couple chapters back to Luke chapter 3. I think it's in Luke 3. Luke 3. Luke 3, verse 10. So when the people asked him, saying, what shall we do then? He said, to who has 2 tunics, let him who give to him who has none. He who has food, let him do likewise. You guys that got more than you really need, if you really want to make a difference, help somebody out, right? And then he goes on. He says, then tax collectors who came to him to be baptized and said, Teacher, what shall we do? And he said to them, collect no more than what is appointed for you. You know, tax collectors, they go around and their job, they made their money by kind of pinching a little bit, right? And that was legal. But there was a margin of what's legal. It's not like, dude, you're in it for 80%. You know, that was when you overstepped your bounds, right? So that's why tax collectors were hated. So, verse 14, likewise to the what? Who's he talking to? Soldiers.
Yep.
Ask him, saying, what shall we do? And he said, quit the army. Is that what he said right there?
No.
Nope.
What's he say?
Do not extort money from anyone by threats or by false accusations, and be content with your wages.
Yeah. Don't intimidate anyone or accuse falsely, and be content with your wages. So there are some soldiers that's going to be a real challenge for your ego. There's some soldiers going to be a real challenge for violence. I mean, like, I've known dudes, man, that I even hated playing football with them when we were kids. Like, they just played too rough. You know what I mean? You remember those guys that you're like, man, Jason's playing, and he's going to want to hit me real hard, you know? And it wasn't like I'm okay with getting hit hard, but like, it was like he got an adrenaline rush. Like, he just craved violence, right? Well, if you crave violence, the army is not the place for you, because it's going to feed your that side of you, and that's the side that, as a Christian, you cannot feed anymore, because you can't be about intimidation. Right now, there's a time and place where your shadow's got to get bigger than somebody else's, and there's a need for it then. Amen.
Yeah.
But your motives then are not because you need to listen to me, but I'm doing what's better for the sum of the whole, right?
Right.
So if you went back to war, now Aaron, from your perspective, if you were sent in as a medic, right, is that what you think you'd be deployed as if you were deployed today?
When I get to where I'm going, I'll say that way. I can't deploy until I graduate right now, but I'll be like a nurse as a commissioned officer, and I'd be in charge of like a hospital wing, or maybe I might be attached with a doctor to like a ranger unit or something as like a forward operating medical team.
That's a whole lot of words to say what?
To say I would be a nurse stitching people up.
Right. So if you were set in that situation, what might change about you? Would it be hard if you're looking in the face of an enemy?
Yeah, I was once told by one of my instructors at school that if I ever have to pick up a rifle, then we already lost and there's no point. I was told that on the when I had to go to the range because he knew I was going to be a nurse. But yeah, it'd be very difficult because stuff like that happens.
Yeah, I mean, like how hard would it be as a Christian to know, like, they kick the doors open, right? Boom, the doors fly open, and here's some dude that you know that just ignited the bag of BBs on his chest, right? The rusty nails, you know, the pieces of glass, and for whatever reason, the percussion blast carried it outward, and it didn't really, I mean, he got him, but it didn't get him, you know? And there's 9 servicemen that are dead over here. I mean, like, what was it, a week ago today, or 2 days ago was Memorial Day, when all our buddies were putting their pictures of the guys. I'm assuming that's who you had on your wall, right? Dudes that didn't come home, like on Facebook.
The guys that I had on my wall were guys that came home, but even when you come home, People still struggle with their demons.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, and these are exactly the kind of things that walking in the light and talking about, having conversations about our relationship with God could very well have helped them from making that final decision to terminate life.
Because it was their own, right?
It was their own. It's heavy, because some of these guys are like, one of them was my mentor, and he was hard, man, very, very hard, tough as leather, but so, it gets to the point where I'm sure you could probably tell me as a machinist, there's probably some things that, sure, they're real hard, but that also means when dropped from a certain height, they fracture really easily.
Yeah.
Because there's just not enough durability there, or the ability to be resilient and ask, hey, Chris, I'm struggling and I need your help. Yeah,
and it's because, especially for dudes, man, pride, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're the soldier with X amount of kills and this combat story, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm scared to be alone.
Or that was my friend Andy. My friend Andy was a guy who prided himself on being a ranger, and then he leaves military service, and he is no longer. That's not how people see him anymore. Now he's
mechanic,
Andy that works at Konica Minolta or something like that.
Right, and he's just a factory worker then. Just a clock puncher,
something like that.
It's tough, right? Yeah. So, do you think it would be hard, Aaron?
Yeah, but with, I'll say, the kind of instincts I have as would have as a medical professional, I think it would kick in because, if that happened, I might have 20 other people behind me laying in beds with, whatever type of injury, shrapnel, that had just come off the line that I now have to protect because I'm the only one that is able-bodied. Mm-hmm. And it then becomes I have to protect my brothers that are already wounded.
It's still a rescue.
Still a rescue.
So let's stitch this up, guys, and let's just talk a minute. What would you tell somebody, Aaron, from a perspective of a Christian today that wanted to, what would you warn somebody about, and what would you tell them as a great thing about serving as a Christian?
I mean, I would warn them based on my own personal experience that it might be an initial struggle to wrestle with the idea of taking somebody else's life if they don't already understand that aspect.
I'm not going to tell anybody that they're wrong that has that idea.
Right.
I'm just not going to. If somebody's a conscientious objector or whatever, that's fine. I mean, you do you. I don't think the Bible teaches that, and we talked about that last week. But what would you tell them that is a joy from being a Christian?
Something for me that's a joy is just the ability to serve others and know that I'm not only serving the people that are standing next to me in line, but also serving everyone else back home.
What about the crisis? Right. So there's the pandemic that has ran from time immemorial is sin. Right. So now you're in the barracks with all these guys. You have ready-made scenario to teach somebody the gospel. Right.
Right. My best personal experience with that, when I was going through basic training, I actually had a guy who slept 2 bunks over who was a devil worshiper. And I was able to just by simply talking to him and loving on him, I was able to get him to study with me. And I wasn't able to baptize him.
So you didn't soap in a sock him for being a devil worshiper?
No, I was actually one of the only people that would talk to him because everybody was like, oh man, this guy over here, he's a devil worshiper.
Right,
but
he's crazy.
I went right up to him and I was like, why do you believe what you believe? And he told me his story, and I actually told him my testimony of conversion, and we actually, other than the paths we chose, we kind of had similar stories of how we ended up where we were.
So Mike, tell me
So I tell you right now, the temptation in the military is just like it is when you're going about your day. The world is still in the military. I mean, the reality is that there's just a lot of people that come from a lot of walks of life, and they're I know, and so by that, what Aaron just described is that you've got people coming with their own experience and their own baggage and their own beliefs, and so you do have to be careful that getting taken in with your unit and the guys and girls that you're working with, that you don't fall into those same things, whether that be going and having alcoholic beverages after hours, or just
Going to the club.
Yeah, going out to the club. Behavior that is just it's not conducive with being a good servant of God. And then the blessing though is that, and just like Aaron said, is that you're gonna meet a lot of people. And maybe you're not evangelizing every single person that you come across, but you're getting the opportunity to be a good steward of Christianity and show them that as Christians that we're treating people with respect, and that they're not hearing us talking foul-mouthed languages, but that we're diligent, we're trying to do our job, we're working hard, we're here to help others, right? And by them seeing those traits, they're like, man, I want to be near that guy.
You validate Christianity.
Exactly. And that's an opportunity that you have with a lot of different people that you're gonna. I mean, like you heard me at the beginning. I said I went from Tennessee to Fort Bragg, Italy, Hawaii. I mean, I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of people that I've probably come across, shaked hands with, had a small conversation with, and the majority of them, I didn't do that as a Christian. And I think about what kind of impact I could have had with a change of mindset.
Amen. Hey, I appreciate you guys coming, and thanks so much for your time. Hit that button down there for me, Mike. Now hit it, and make sure you hold it.
I'm going to hit it. I got one job, y'all.
Press it the right way.
This is the Unscripted Podcast.